Hey folks, Josh here with Presidio Advisors. I primarily work with millennials who have equity comp, and a lot of my millennial clients, they also have kids, and their kids are young, and they are about to enter preschool or be in daycare or have a nanny. And these are, the cost of daycare or nanny is large, and it's known, and it's a recurring expense that my clients know that they're going to have for the next 1 to 5 years potentially. And so the question that I often get is, what do we do with the cash that we have right now that we know we're going to need to pay for these childcare expenses? What do we do with that cash? Do we put it in the market? Do we put it into a bond or a CD or a high yield savings account or a money market fund? What is the best strategy here? And what I often or what I always tell clients is that if you know you're going to need this cash within the next 1 to 5 years, especially for something as important as preschool or daycare or a nanny, you definitely want to put that into a low volatility asset, such as a money market fund, a bond, or a high yield savings account. You do not want to take that risk in the market, even though the market may generate higher returns, but it also comes with a lot higher risk. And that kind of ties into this concept of sequence of return risk, which is what we're going to talk about today. So sequence of return risk is the idea that, early on in your time horizon, let's call it 5 years for us today, you have money in the market and the market just tanks. It's down, let's call it 15%. That's a problem because if you're withdrawing on the principal of your portfolio, it's going to take a long time or a lot longer to catch up to where you could have been if you didn't have that initial big drop. And so in today's video, we're going to mathematically walk through that. And I want to show you kind of where you could potentially net, obviously in just a simplified, example of what might happen if we take too much risk for cash expenses that we know we're going to need. So in scenario number one here, let's assume we've got about $81,000 and we know that we're going to need this to pay for daycare or preschool or the nanny or whatever it may be. So we decide to put it into a treasury bill. And right now, let's assume we can get about 4.2%. And I've kind of tapered this down over the next 5 years or so with the assumption that interest rates are going to go down, but we have no idea. They could go up, they could go down, they could stay the same, but I think this is fairly reasonable. So in year one, it's January 3rd of 2025 right now. So we've got about $82,000 in January of year one. We think we're going to generate, or we've kind of locked in 4.2%. And each month we need to withdraw $1,500 to pay for the nanny or for daycare. And so if we start with 81,725, we generate 4.2% throughout the year. We withdraw $1,500 each month. On December 31st of 2025, we're going to end up with $66,809. That becomes our beginning balance for January 1st of 2026. And then it's kind of rinse and repeat until at the end of year five here, our ending balance is precisely $0. And so very coincidentally, I've kind of made the numbers work here, but we end up with $0 just for kind of example purposes here. So this is great. This is kind of where we needed to be. We needed to pay for daycare. We're kind of done with daycare at the end of year five. What happens though if we decide, hey, well, we kind of want to put our money into the market? The market's been generating pretty strong results over the past couple of years, up 20%. We'd like to take a little higher risk for a little higher return, knowing that on average, maybe the market returns 7, 8% or so. And so that's kind of scenario number two, which is something that I hear often, and I try to steer clients away from scenario number two here. And that's because, let's say that actually the market has a terrible year this year, and it's down 15%. But then it goes back up 8.5% in year two, 8.5%, 8.5, 8.9% or so. So pretty decent returns in years 2 through 5, but a really terrible return in year one. Most people are pretty surprised to see what the ending balance looks like. And I'm going to show that to you right here. So what we're seeing here is that by the end of year five, assuming these annualized returns, you're actually in the red by close to $11,000. And the reason for this is because after year one, your ending balance is so low that it is unable to catch back up, even with pretty strong annualized returns in years 2 through 5. And that's also because not only did your principal drop by 15%, but you've had to withdraw on that principal $1,500 a month because you have to pay for daycare, you have to pay for childcare expenses. And so this scenario number two is really the definition of sequence of return risk, where you have a downfall or a really pretty down year in the first year, and that really throws off the rest of your portfolio for the remaining time horizon here. Now, the flip side could be true as well. These are the exact same annualized returns, but in a totally different sequence. And where do we end up with? Well, we end up with a surplus of about $8,300. And that's because we ended up with a much higher initial balance. And then when the drawdown happened, we had a much higher initial balance to begin with, 29,000 versus $7,500 in scenario two. So obviously, we'd love for scenario three to be kind of the standard here, but anyone's year five or this person's year five could be this person's year one, right? And so, if you have that dip, then that could really be detrimental to your plan. So this is kind of the reason why, again, as just to kind of reiterate here, if you have cash needs that you're going to have within the next 5 years, particularly something as important as preschool or paying for a nanny or some sort of daycare, I think it's really important that we move those assets into something that's low volatility. You don't want to take equity risk. You don't want to be in stocks because the risk is just too high for something as important as that. So hopefully that was helpful. If you have questions, you can reach out to me. I'm Josh at presidioadvisorsllc.com, or you can go to my website, presidioadvisorsllc.com, and I hope that helps. Take care.